Let's get on with it. Here we go. Chapter 12. Chapter 12. Vague sense of movement, of darkness, and of cold attended Carly's consciousness for what seemed endless time. A fall over rocks and a severe thrust from a sharp branch brought an acute appreciation of her position, if not of her mental state. Night had fallen, the stars were out, she had stumbled over a low ledge. Evidently she had wandered around, dazedly and aimlessly, until brought to her senses by pain. But for a gleam of campfires through the cedars, she would have been lost. It did not matter. She was lost anyhow. What was it that had happened? Charlie, the sheep herder. Then the thunderbolt of his words burst upon her, and she collapsed to the cold stones. She lay quivering from head to toe. She dug her fingers into the moss and lichen. "Oh, God, to think after all it happened," she moaned. There had been a rending within her breast, as of physical violence, from which she now suffered anguish. There were 1,000 stinging nerves. There was a mortal sickness of horror, of insupportable, heart-breaking loss. She could not endure it. She could not live under it. She lay there until energy supplanted shock. Then she rose to rush into the darkest shadows of the cedars, to grope here and there, hanging her head, wringing her hands, beating her breast. "It can't be true," she cried. "Not after my struggle, my victory. Not now." But there had been no victory, and now it was too late. She was betrayed, ruined, lost. That wonderful love had wrought transformation in her, and now havoc. Once she fell against the branches of a thick cedar that upheld her. The fragrance which had been sweet was now bitter. Life that had been bliss was now hateful. She could not keep still for a single moment. Black night, cedars, brush, rocks, washes seemed not to obstruct her. In her frenzy she rushed on, tearing her dress, her hands, her hair. The imagery in this, by the way, I mean, it's just like those bodice ripper novels, like the Gothic ones where you have the women with all the big hair fleeing away from that castle in the background. Those there, the Twitter account Pulp Librarian, he like posts like Twitter threads on those sometimes. It's just like running through the darkness, just like out in the middle of nowhere for no apparent reason. All right. Black night, cedars, brush, rocks, washes seemed not to obstruct her. In a frenzy she rushed on, tearing her dress, her hands, her hair. Violence of some kind was imperative. All at once, a pale, gleaming, open space, shimmering under the stars, lay before her. It was water, deep lake, and instantly a hideous, terrible longing to destroy herself obsessed her. She had no fear. She could have welcomed the cold, slimy depths that meant oblivion. But could they really bring oblivion? A year ago she would have believed so, and would no longer have endured such agony. She had changed. A cursed strength had come to her, and it was this strength that now augmented her torture. She flung wide her arms to the pitiless white stars and looked up at them. "My hope, my faith, my love have failed me," she whispered. "They have been a lie. I went through hell for them, and now I've nothing to live for. Oh, let me end it all." If she prayed to the stars for mercy, it was denied her. Passionlessly they blazed on. But she could not kill herself. In that hour, death would have been the only relief and peace left to her. Stricken by the cruelty of her fate, she fell back against the stones and gave up to grief. Nothing was left but fierce pain. The youth and vitality and intensity of her then locked arms with an anguish and torment. What? Oh, the youth and vitality and intensity of her then locked arms with an anguish and torment and a cheated, unsatisfied love. Strength of mind and body involuntarily resisted the ravages of this catastrophe. Will-power seemed nothing, but the flesh of her, that medium of exquisite sensation, so full of life, so prone to joy, refused to surrender. The part of her that felt fought terribly for its heritage. All night long Kali lay there. The crescent moon went down. The stars moved on their course. The coyotes ceased to wail. The wind died away. The lapping of the waves along the lake shore wore to gentle splash. The whispering of the insects stopped as the cold of dawn approached. The darkest hour fell, hour of silence, solitude, and melancholy, when the desert lay tranced, cold, waiting, mournful, without light of moon or stars or sun. In the grey dawn, Kali dragged her bruised and aching body back to her tent, and fastening the door, she threw off wet clothes and boots and fell upon her bed. "Good morning, Timo. Good morning. So good to see you. What's going on?" Slumber of exhaustion came to her. When she awoke, the tent was light, and the moving shadows of cedar boughs on the white canvas told that the sun was straight above. Kali ached as never before. A deep pang seemed invested in every bone. Her heart felt swollen out of proportion to its space in her breast. Her breathing came slow, and it hurt. Her blood was sluggish. Suddenly she shut her eyes. She loathed the light of day. What was it that had happened? Then the brutal truth flashed over her again, in aspect new, with all the old bitterness. For an instant she experienced a suffocating sensation, as if the canvas had sagged under the burden of the heavy air, and was crushing her breast and heart. Was that a cat in a box? It's a little small. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is a cat in a box. Very nice. Then wave after wave of emotion swept over her. The storm winds of grief and passion were loosened again, and she writhed in her misery. Someone knocked on her door. The Mexican woman called anxiously. Kali awoke to the fact that her presence was not solitary on the physical earth, even if her soul seemed stricken to eternal loneliness. Even in the desert there was a world to consider. Vanity that had bled to death, pride that had been crushed, availed her not here. But something else came to her support. The lesson of the West had been to endure, not to shirk, to face an issue, not to hide. Kali got up, bathed, dressed, brushed, and arranged her disheveled hair. The face she saw in the mirror excited her amaze and pity. And then she went out in answer to the call for dinner. But she could not eat. The ordinary functions of life appeared to be deadened. The day happened to be Sunday, and therefore the workmen were absent. Kali had the place to herself. How the half-completed house mocked her. She could not bear to look at it. What use could she make of it now? Flo Hutter had become the working comrade of Glenn Kilbourne, the mistress of his cabin. She was his wife, and she would be the mother of his children. That thought gave birth to the darkest hour of Kali Birch's life. She became possessed as by 1,000 devils. She merely became a female robbed of her mate. Reason was not in her, nor charity, nor justice. All that was abnormal in human nature seemed coalesced in her, dominant, passionate, savage, terrible. She hated with an incredible and insane ferocity. In the seclusion of her tent, crouched on her bed, silent, locked, motionless, she yet was the embodiment of all terrible strife and storm in nature. You know what? What if Charlie the sheep herder was actually just joking with her? Or what if this is all just like a bad dream, like Dallas? Maybe. Her heart was a maelstrom, and would have whirled and sucked down to hell all the beings that were men. Her soul was a bottomless gulf, filled with the gales and the fires of jealousy, superhuman to destroy. That fury consumed all her remaining strength, and from the relapse she sank to sleep. Morning brought the inevitable reaction. However long her other struggles, this monumental and final one would be brief. She realized that, yet was unable to understand how it could be possible, unless shock or death or mental aberration ended the fight. An eternity of emotion lay back between this awakening of intelligence and the hour of her fall into the clutches of primitive passion. That morning she faced herself in the mirror and asked, "Now, what do I owe you?" It was not her voice that answered. It was beyond her. But it said, "Go on. You are cut adrift. You are alone. You owe none but yourself. Go on. Not backward, not to the depths, but up. Upward." She shuddered at such a decree. How impossible for her! All animal, all woman, all emotion, how could she live on the cold, pure heights? Yet she owed something intangible and inscrutable to herself. Was it the thing that woman lacked physically, yet contained hidden in her soul? An element of eternal spirit to rise. Because of heartbreak and ruin and irreparable loss, must she fall? Was loss of love and husband and children only a test? The present hour would be swallowed in the sum of life's trials. She could not go back. She would not go down. There was wrenched from her tried and sore heart an unalterable and unquenchable decision to make her own soul prove the evolution of woman. Vessel of blood and flesh she might be, doomed by nature to the reproduction of her kind. But she had in her the supreme spirit and power to carry on the progress of the ages, the climb of woman out of the darkness. Carly went out to the workmen. The house should be completed, and she would live in it. Always there was the stretching and illimitable desert to look at, and the grand heave upward of the mountains. Hoyle was full of zest for the practical details of the building. He saw nothing of the havoc wrought in her, nor did the other workmen glance more than casually at her. In this, Carly lost something of a shirking fear that her loss and grief were patent to all eyes. That afternoon she mounted the most spirited of the mustangs she had purchased from the Indians. To govern him and stick on him required all her energy, and she rode him hard and far, out across the desert, across mile after mile of cedar forest, clear to the foothills. She rested there, absorbed in gazing desertward, and upon turning back again, she ran him over the level stretches. Wind and branch threshed her, seemingly to ribbons. Violence seemed good for her. A fall had no fear for her now. She reached camp at dusk, hot as fire, breathless and strengthless. But she had earned something. Such action required constant use of muscle and mind. If need be, she could drive both to the very furthermost limit. She could ride and ride until the future, like the immensity of the desert there, might swallow her. She changed her clothes and rested a while. The call to supper found her hungry. In this fact she discovered mockery of her grief. Love was not the food of life. Exhausted nature's need of rest and sleep was no respecter of a woman's emotion. Next day, Carly rode northward, wildly and fearlessly, as if this conscious activity was the initiative of an endless number of rides that were to save her. As before, the foothills called her, and she went on until she came to a very high one. Carly dismounted from her panting horse, answering the familiar impulse to attain heights by her own effort. "Am I only a weakling?" she asked herself. "Only a creature mined by the fever of the soul, thrown from one emotion to another, never the same, yearning, suffering, sacrificing, hoping and changing, forever the same? What is it that drives me? A great city with all its attractions has failed to help me realize my life. So have friends failed, so has the world. What can solitude and grandeur do? All this obsession of mine, all this strange feeling for simple, elemental, earthly things likewise will fail me. Yet I am driven. They would call me a madwoman." It took Carly a full hour of slow, body-bending labor to climb to the summit of that hill. High, steep, and rugged, it resisted ascension. But at last she surmounted it and sat alone on the heights, with naked eyes and an unconscious prayer on her lips. What was it that had happened? Could there be here a different answer from that which always mocked her? She had been a girl, not accountable for loss of mother, for choice of home and education. She had belonged to a class. She had grown to womanhood in it. She had loved, and in loving had escaped the evil of her day, if not its taint. She had lived only for herself. Conscience had awakened, but alas, too late. She had overthrown the sordid, self-seeking habit of life. She had awakened to real womanhood. She had fought the insidious spell of modernity, and she had defeated it. She had learned the thrill of taking root in new soil, the pain and joy of labor, the bliss of solitude, the promise of home and love and motherhood. But she had gathered all these marvelous things to her soul too late for happiness. "Now it is answered," she declared aloud. "That is what has happened, and all that is past. Is there anything left? If so, what?" She flung her query out to the winds of the desert, but the desert seemed too gray, too vast, too remote, too aloof, too measureless. It was not concerned with her little life. Then she turned to the mountain kingdom. It seemed overpoweringly near at hand. It loomed above her to pierce the fleecy clouds. It was only a stupendous upheaval of earth crust, grown over at the base by leagues and leagues of pine forest, belted along the middle by vast slanting zigzag slopes of aspen, rent and riven toward the heights into canyon and gorge, bared above to cliffs and corners of craggy rock, whitened at the sky-piercing peaks by snow. Its beauty and sublimity were lost upon Carly now. She was concerned with its travail, its age, its endurance, its strength, and she studied it with magnified sight. What incomprehensible subterranean force had swelled those immense slopes and lifted the huge bulk aloft to the clouds? Cataclysm of nature, the expanding or shrinking of the earth, vast volcanic action under the surface. Whatever it had been, it had left its expression of the travail of the universe. This mountain mass had been hot gas when flung from the parent sun, and now it was solid granite. What had it endured in the making? What indeed had been its This is so silly. What indeed had been its dimensions before the millions of years of its struggle? Eruption, earthquake, avalanche, the attrition of glacier, the erosion of water, the cracking of frost, the weathering of rain and wind and snow. These it had eternally fought and resisted in vain, yet still it stood magnificent, frowning, battle-scarred, undefeated. Its sky-piercing peaks were as cries for mercy to the infinite. This old mountain realized its doom. It had to go, perhaps to make room for a newer and better kingdom. But it endured because of the spirit of nature. The great notched circular line of rock below and between the peaks, in the body of the mountain, showed where in ages past the heart of living granite had blown out to let loose on all the near surrounding desert the streams of black lava and the hills of black cinders. Despite its fringe of green, it was hoary with age. Every looming grey-faced wall, massive and sublime, seemed a monument of its mastery over time. Every deep-cut canyon, showing the skeleton ribs, the caverns and caves, its avalanche-carved slides, its long, fan-shaped, spreading taluses, carried conviction to the spectator that it was but a frail bit of rock, that its life was little and brief, that upon it had been laid the merciless curse of nature. Change. Change must unknit the very knots of the center of the earth. So its strength lay in the sublimity of its defiance. It meant to endure to the last rolling grain of sand. It was a dead mountain of rock, without spirit, yet it taught a grand lesson to the seeing eye. Life was only a part, perhaps an infinitely small part, of nature's plan. Death and decay were just as important to her inscrutable design. The universe had not been created for life, ease, pleasure, and happiness of a man-creature developed from lower organisms. If nature's secret was the developing of a spirit through all time, Kali divined that she had it within her. So the present meant little. "I have no right to be unhappy," concluded Kali. "I had no right to Glenn Kilbourne. I failed him. In that I failed myself. Neither life nor nature failed me, nor love. It is no longer a mystery. Unhappiness is only a change. Happiness itself is only change. So what does it matter? The great thing is to see life, to understand, to feel, to work, to fight, to endure. It is not my fault I am here, but it is my fault if I leave this strange old earth the poorer for my failure. I will no longer be little. I will find strength. I will endure. I still have eyes, ears, nose, taste. I can feel the sun, the wind, the nip of frost. Must I slink like a craven because I've lost the love of one man? Must I hate Flo Hutter because she will make Glenn happy? Never. All of this seems better so, because through it I am changed. I might have lived on, a selfish clod." Kali turned from the mountain kingdom and faced her future with the profound and sad and far-seeing look that had come with her lesson. She knew what to give. Sometime and somewhere there would be recompense. She would hide her wound in the faith that time would heal it. And the ordeal she set herself to prove her sincerity and strength was to ride down to Oak Creek Canyon. Kali did not wait many days. Strange how the old vanity held her back until something of the havoc in her face should be gone. One morning she set out early, riding her best horse, and she took a sheep trail across the country. The distance by road was much farther. The June morning was cool, sparkling, fragrant. Mockingbirds sang from the topmost twig of cedars. Doves cooed in the pines. Sparrowhawks sailed low over the open, grassy patches. Desert primroses showed their rounded pink clusters in sunny places, and here and there burned the carmine of Indian paintbrush. Jack-rabbits and cottontails bounded and scampered away through the sage. The desert had life and color and movement this June day. And as always, there was the dry fragrance on the air. Her mustang had been inured to long and consistent travel over the desert. Her weight was nothing to him, and he kept to the swinging lope for miles. As she approached Oak Creek Canyon, however, she drew him to a trot and then a walk. Sight of the deep, red-walled and green-floored canyon was a shock to her. The trail came out on the road that led to Ryan's sheep camp, at a point several miles west of the cabin where Kali had encountered Hayes Ruff. She remembered the curves and stretches, and especially the steep jump-off where the road led down off the rim into the canyon. Here she dismounted and walked. From the foot of this descent she knew every rod of the way would be familiar to her, and, woman-like, she wanted to turn away and fly from them. Good Lord! But she kept on and mounted again at level ground. The murmur of the creek suddenly assailed her ears, sweet, sad, memorable, strangely powerful to hurt, yet the sound seemed of long ago. Down here summer had advanced. Rich, thick foliage overspread the winding road of sand. Then out of the shade she passed into the sunnier regions of isolated pines. Along here she had raced calico with Glenn's bay, and here she had caught him, and there was the place she had fallen. She halted a moment under the pine tree where Glenn had held her in his arms. Tears dimmed her eyes. If only she had known then the truth, the reality. But regrets were useless. By and by a craggy red wall loomed above the trees, and its pipe organ conformation was familiar to Carly. She left the road and turned to go down to the creek. Sycamores and maples and great boulders and mossy ledges overhanging the water, and a huge sentinel pine marked the spot where she and Glenn had eaten their lunch that last day. Her mustang splashed into the clear water and halted to drink. Beyond, through the trees, Carly saw the sunny red-earthed clearing that was Glenn's farm. She looked and fought herself, and bit her quivering lip until she tasted blood. Then she rode out into the open. The whole west side of the canyon had been cleared and cultivated and plowed. But she gazed no farther. She did not want to see the spot where she had given Glenn his ring and had parted from him. She rode on. If she could pass West Fork, she believed her courage would rise to the completion of this ordeal. Places were what she feared, places that she had loved while blindly believing she hated. There the narrow gap of green and blue split the looming red wall. She was looking into West Fork. Up there stood the cabin. How fierce a pang rent her breast. She faltered at the crossing of the branch stream, and almost surrendered. The water murmured, the leaves rustled, the bees hummed, the birds sang, all with some sad sweetness that seemed of the past. Then the trail leading up West Fork was like a barrier. She saw horse tracks in it. Next she descried boot tracks, the shape of which was so well remembered that it shook her heart. There were fresh tracks in the sand, pointing in the direction of the lodge. Ah, that was where Glenn lived now. Carly strained at her will to keep it fighting her memory. The glory and the dream were gone. A touch of spur urged her mustang into a gallop. The splashing ford of the creek, the still eddying pool beyond, the green orchards, the white lacy waterfall, and Lolomai Lodge. Nothing had altered, but Carly seemed returning after many years. Slowly she dismounted. Slowly she climbed the porch steps. Was there no one at home? Yet the vacant doorway, the silence, something attested to the knowledge of Carly's presence. Then suddenly Mrs. Hutter fluttered out with Flo behind her. "Oh, you dear girl, I'm so glad," cried Mrs. Hutter, her voice trembling. "I'm glad to see you, too," said Carly, bending to receive Mrs. Hutter's embrace. Carly saw dim eyes, the stress of agitation, but no surprise. That is... I guess that's Flo. The Western girl, I guess that's Flo. "Oh, Carly," burst out the Western girl, with voice rich and full, yet tremulous. "Flo, I've come to wish you happiness," replied Carly, very low. Was it the same Flo? This seemed more of a woman, strange now, white and strained, beautiful, eager, questioning. A cry of gladness burst from her. Carly felt herself enveloped in a strong, close clasp, and then a warm, quick kiss of joy. It shocked her, yet somehow thrilled. Sure was the welcome here. Sure was the strained situation also, but the voice rang too glad a note for Carly. It touched her deeply, yet she could not understand. She had not measured the depth of Western friendship. "Have you seen Glenn?" queried Flo breathlessly. "Oh, no, indeed not," replied Carly, slowly gaining composure. The nervous agitation of these women had stilled her own. "I just rode up the trail. Where is he?" "Oh, he was here a moment ago," panted Flo. "Oh, Carly, we sure are locoed. Why, we only heard an hour ago that you were at Deep Lake. Charlie rode in. He told us. I thought my heart would break. Poor Glenn, when he heard it, but never mind me. Jump on your horse and run to West Fork." The spirit of her was like the strength of her arms as she carried Carly across the porch and shoved her down the steps. "Climb on and run, Carly," cried Flo. "If you only knew how glad he'll be that you came." Carly leaped into the saddle and wheeled the mustang, but she had no answer for the girl's singular, almost wild exultance. Then, like a shot, the spirited mustang was off down the lane. Carly wondered with swelling heart. Was her coming such a wondrous surprise, so unexpected and big in generosity, something that would make Kilbourne as glad as it had seemed to make Flo? Carly thrilled to this assurance. Down the lane she flew. The red walls blurred and the sweet wind whipped her face. At the trail she swerved the mustang, but did not check his gait. Under the great pines he sped, and round the bulging wall. At the rocky incline leading to the creek, she pulled the fiery animal to a trot. How low and clear the water! As Carly forded it, fresh, cool drops splashed into her face. Again she spurred her mount, and again trees and walls rushed by. Up and down the yellow bits of trail, on over the brown mats of pine needles, until there, in the sunlight, shone the little gray log cabin with a tall form standing in the door. One instant the canyon tilted on end for Carly, and she was riding into the blue sky. Then some magic of soul sustained her so that she saw clearly. Reaching the cabin, she reined in her mustang. "Hello, Glenn, look who's here," she cried, not wholly failing of gaiety. He threw up his sombrero. "Whoopee!" he yelled, in a stentorian voice that rolled across the canyon and bellowed in hollow echo, and then clapped from wall to wall. The unexpected western yell, so strange from Glenn, disconcerted Carly. Had he only answered her spirit of greeting? Had hers rung false? But he was coming to her. She had seen the bronze of his face turn to white. How gaunt and worn he looked. Older he appeared, with deeper lines and whiter hair. His jaw dropped. "Carly Birch. So it was you?" he queried hoarsely. "Glenn, I reckon it was," she replied. "I bought your Deep Lake ranch site. I came back too late, but it's never too late for some things. I've come to wish you and Flo all the happiness in the world, and to say that we must be friends." The way he looked at her made her tremble. He strode up beside the mustang, and he was so tall that his shoulder came abreast of her. He placed a big, warm hand on hers as it rested, ungloved, on the pommel of the saddle. "Have you seen Flo?" he asked. "I just left her. It was funny, the way she rushed me off after you. As if there weren't two—" Was it Glenn's eyes or the movement of his hand that checked her utterance? His gaze pierced her soul. His hand slid along her arm to her waist, around it. Her heart seemed to burst. "Kick your feet out of the stirrups," he ordered. Instinctively, she obeyed. Then with a strong pull he hauled her half out of the saddle, pell-mell into his arms. Carly had no resistance. She sank limp, in an agony of amaze. Was this a dream? Swift and hard his lips met hers, and again, and again. "Oh, my God, Glenn, are you mad?" she whispered, almost swooning. "Sure, I reckon I am," he replied huskily, and pulled her all the way out of the saddle. Carly would have fallen but for his support. She could not think. She was all instinct. Only the amaze, the sudden horror, drifted, faded as before, fires of her heart. "Kiss me," he commanded. She would have kissed him if death were the penalty. How his face blurred in her dimmed sight. Was that a strange smile? Then he held her back from him. "Carly, you came to wish Flo and me happiness?" he asked. "Oh, yes, yes. Pity me, Glenn. Let me go. I meant well. I should never have come." "Do you love me?" he went on, with passionate, shaking clasp. "God help me, I do, and now it will kill me." "What did that damned fool Charlie tell you?" "I knew it. I knew it. The strange content of his query, the trenchant force of it, brought her upright, with sight suddenly cleared. Was this giant the tragic Glenn who had strode to her from the cabin door? "Charlie told me you and Flo were married," she whispered. "You didn't believe him," returned Glenn. She could no longer speak. She could only see her lover, as if transfigured, limned dark against the looming red wall. "That was one of Charlie's queer jokes. I told you to beware of him. Flo is married, yes, and very happy. I'm unutterably happy, too, but I'm not married. Lee Stanton was the lucky bridegroom. Carly, the moment I saw you, I knew you'd come back to me." The end. There's no more pages. This is such a terrible book. That's so bad. Oh, man. They're going to be doing the jazz. That's right. Getting that jazz on. Oh, man. So, are we glad that's over? Yeah, I think so. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I called it, too. I called it. The best part was my commentary. Man. Okay. That is without a doubt the worst one that we've read. The worst one that we've read. Okay. Happy ever after. Well, I mean, that's something. That does count for something, I suppose. Okay, I think everyone's agreeing that that was a pretty miserable. It's a miserable way to end too. Just a practical joke. Alrighty. I mean, it had entertaining parts in it, but man, I mean, let's see. This is. I'm just going to look up Zane Grey real fast. I mean, okay, this book was written in 1920. How long had he been writing? Okay, Wiki Zane Grey. Just going to look up Zane Grey. There we go. Writing career. Bloop. Oh. It's tell you what, for all his moral lecturing in this one here, apparently Zane Grey had a whole bunch of mistresses, a whole bunch, and his wife knew about it. But all right, man, okay. Where is? Trying to find when did he start writing? Well, that was around 1909. Huh. All right. Yeah, too long to read right now. But anyway, yeah, a strange cat. All right. Buried in Pennsylvania. All right. Okay. It had entertaining parts in bunny quotes. Boy, oh boy, it was garbo. It was terrible. Break out the brandy. Did they do any brandy? I don't know. I'm not sure if they did. All his mistresses were muses, says Rose. Maybe. Anyway, so yeah, that's the end of that, and a good thing that we're at the end there. Let me look up real fast, and this looking up Lotos. I'm just gonna go no. Maybe you spelled it Lotus. I don't know. Okay, going to here. Okay, so this is okay. This is 72%. Okay. Okay. I have the pleasure of doing nothing and of catching now and then a glimpse of supreme joy in the strange state of thinking nothing. Tennyson came close to this in his Lotus Eaters. Only to see, only to feel is enough. Okay, so that's that little bit there. So I figured we may as well read The Lotus Eaters by Alfred Lord Tennyson. See what that's about and put this thing behind us. Alrighty. So this here, The Lotus Eaters. The Lotus Eaters. No idea what this is about. I'm going to find out. Courage, he said, and pointed toward the land. This mounting wave will roll us shoreward soon. In the afternoon they came unto a land, in which it seemed always afternoon. All round the coast the languid air did swoon, breathing like one that hath a weary dream. Full-faced above the valley stood the moon, and like a downward smoke the slender stream along the cliff to fall and pause and fall did seem. A land of streams, some like a downward smoke, slow dropping veils of thinnest lawn did go, and some through wavering lights and shadows broke, rolling a slumberous sheet of foam below. They saw the gleaming river seaward flow. From the inner land, far off 3 mountain tops, 3 silent pinnacles of aged snow, stood sunset flushed and dewed with showery drops. Up clomb the shadowy pine above the woven copse. Man, this is tricky. The charmed sunset lingered low adown. In the red west, through mountain clefts the dale was seen far inland, and the yellow down bordered with palm, and many a winding vale, and meadow set with slender galingale. A land where all things always seemed the same, and round about the keel with faces pale, dark faces pale against that rosy flame, the mild-eyed, melancholy Lotus Eaters came. Branches they bore of that enchanted stem, laden with flower and fruit, whereof they gave to each, but whoso did receive of them, and taste, to him the gushing of the wave, far, far away, did seem to mourn and rave on alien shores. And if his fellows spake, his voice was thin as voices from the grave, and deep asleep he seemed, yet all awake, and music in his ears his beating heart did make. They sat them down upon the yellow sand, between the sun and moon upon the shore, And sweet it was to dream of fatherland, of child and wife and slave. But evermore most weary seemed the sea, weary the oar, weary the wandering fields of barren foam. Then someone said, "We will return no more." And all at once they sang, "Our island home is far beyond the wave. We will no longer roam." This, and then is Corac's song? Is this part of it still? I don't know if Corac's song is actually part of that the Lotus Eaters. Yep, I guess it is. Talks about Lotus later on. Okay, we'll continue. All right. Corac's Song 1. There is sweet music here that softer falls than petals from blown roses on the grass, or night dews on still waters between walls of shadowy granite in a gleaming pass. Music that gentlier on the spirit lies than tired eyelids upon tired eyes. Music that brings sweet sleep down from the blissful skies. Here are cool mosses deep, and through the moss the ivies creep, and in the stream the long-leaved flowers weep, and from the craggy ledge the poppy hangs in sleep. Why are we weighed upon with heaviness, and utterly consumed with sharp distress, while all things else have rest from weariness? All things have rest. Why should we toil alone? We only toil, who are the first of things, and make perpetual moan, still from one sorrow to another thrown, nor ever fold our wings, and cease from wanderings, nor steep our brows in slumber's holy balm, nor hearken what the inner spirit sings. There is no joy but calm. Why should we only toil, the roof and crown of things? Lo, in the middle of the wood, the folded leaf is wooed from out the bud, with winds upon the branch, and there grows green and broad, and takes no care, sun-steeped at noon, and in the moon, nightly dew-fed, and turning yellow, falls and floats adown the air. Lo, sweetened with the summer light, the full-juiced apple, waxing over-mellow, drops in a silent autumn night. All its allotted length of days the flower ripens in its place, ripens and fades, and falls, and hath no toil, fast-rooted in the fruitful soil. Hateful is the dark blue sky, vaulted o'er the dark blue sea. Death is the end of life. Ah, why should life all labor be? Let us alone. Time driveth onward fast, and in a little, while our lips are dumb, let us alone. What is it that will last? All things are taken from us, and become portions and parcels of the dreadful past. Let us alone. What pleasure can we have to war with evil? Is there any peace in ever climbing up the climbing wave? All things have rest and ripen toward the grave in silence. Ripen, fall, and cease. Give us long rest, or death, dark death, or dreamful ease. How sweet it were, hearing the downward stream, with half-shut eyes, ever to seem falling asleep in a half-dream, to dream and dream like yonder amber light, which will not leave the myrrh-bush on the height, to hear each other's whispered speech, eating the lotus day by day, to watch the crisping ripples on the beach, and tender curving lines of creamy spray, to lend our hearts and spirits wholly to the influence of mild-minded melancholy, to muse and brood and live again in memory with those old faces of our infancy heaped over with a mound of grass, 2 handfuls of white dust shut in an urn of brass. Dear is the memory of our wedded lives, and dear the last embraces of our wives, and their warm tears. But all hath suffered change. For surely now our household hearths are cold, our sons inherit us, our looks are strange, and we should come like ghosts to trouble joy. Or else the island princes, overbold, have eat our substance, and the minstrel sings before them of the 10 years' war in Troy, and our great deeds as half-forgotten things. Is there confusion in the little isle? Let what is broken so remain. The gods are hard to reconcile. 'Tis hard to settle order once again. There is confusion worse than death, trouble on trouble, pain on pain, long labor unto aged breath, sore task to hearts worn out by many wars, and eyes grown dim with gazing on the pilot stars. But propped on beds of amaranth and moly, how sweet, while warm airs lull us, blowing lowly, with half-dropped eyelid still, beneath a heaven dark and holy, to watch the long bright river drawing slowly his waters from the purple hill, to hear the dewy echoes calling from cave to cave through the thick-twined vine, to watch the emerald-colored water falling through many a woven acanthus wreath divine, only to hear and see the far-off sparkling brine, only to hear were sweet stretched out beneath the pine. The lotus blooms below the barren peak. The lotus blows by every winding creek. All day the wind breathes low with mellower tone. Through every hollow cave and alley lone, round and round the spicy downs the yellow lotus dust is blown. We have had enough of action and of motion. We rolled to starboard, rolled to larboard, when the surge was seething free, where the wallowing monster spouted his foam fountains in the sea. Let us swear an oath, and keep it with an equal mind, in the hollow lotus land to live, and lie reclined on the hills like gods together, careless of mankind. For they lie beside their nectar, and the bolts are hurled far below them in the valleys, and the clouds are lightly curled. Round their golden houses, girdled with the gleaming world, where they smile in secret, looking over wasted lands, blight and famine, plague and earthquake, roaring deeps and fiery sands, clanging fights and flaming towns and sinking ships and praying hands. But they smile. They find a music scented in a doleful song steaming up, a lamentation and an ancient tale of wrong, like a tale of little meaning, though the words are strong, chanted from an ill-used race of men that cleave the soil, sow the seed and reap the harvest with enduring toil, storing yearly little dews of wheat and wine and oil, till they perish and they suffer. Some, 'tis whispered, down in hell suffer endless anguish. Others in Elysian valleys dwell, resting weary limbs at last on beds of asphodel. Surely, surely, slumber is more sweet than toil, the shore than labor. What? Surely, surely, slumber is more sweet than toil, the shore than labor in the deep mid-ocean, wind and wave and oar. Oh, rest ye, brother mariners, we will not wander more. So I had no idea what that one's about. The Lotus Eaters. You know, this probably is there a, this is, let's look that up. Lotos Eaters. Bloop. The Lotus Eaters. Okay. Published in 1832. Good Lord. It was inspired by his trip to Spain, okay, where they visited the Pyrenees Mountains. It describes a group of mariners who, upon eating the lotus, are put into an altered state of mind and isolated from the outside world. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. And the wiki. Okay. Boy, oh boy. I'm just going to put the link here in chat for people who want to follow up on it there, because I can't read the whole thing. Paste. Bloop. Okay. The Lotus Eaters. There we go. That's the link if anyone needs that. Man, I'm just so annoyed that the chat window is not working. That would have been very, very nice. Very nice. All right. Oh, wow, it's only 11 o'clock. We still got some time to go. Yeah, we do. All right. Okay, we can, boy, yeah, we can get through a couple of things there. We can easily get through another short piece from Time and the Gods by Lord Dunsany, and then, boy, I don't know what to read after that. Maybe another goofy bit by Edith Nesbit, maybe, from the Book of Dragons. Not sure if I have that synchronized on this or not. Man. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, but okay, Melissa likes that plan. Yeah. The Relenting of Sarnidac. The lame boy, Sarnidac, attended sheep on a hill to the southward of the city. Sarnidac was a dwarf, and greatly derided in the city. For the women said, "It's very funny that Sarnidac is a dwarf." And they would point their fingers at him, saying, "This is Sarnidac, he is a dwarf. Also, he is very lame." Once the doors of all the temples in the world swung open to the morning, and Sarnidac with his sheep upon the hill saw strange figures going down the white road, always southwards. All the morning he saw the dust rising above the strange figures, and always they went southwards, right as far as the rim of the Nidun hills, where the white road could be seen no more. And the figures stooped, and seemed to be larger than men. But all men seemed very large to Sarnidac, and he could not see clearly through the dust. And Sarnidac shouted to them, as he hailed all people that passed down the long white road, and none of the figures looked to left or right, and none of them turned to answer Sarnidac. But then few people ever answered him, because he was lame and a small dwarf. Still the figures went striding swiftly, stooping forward through the dust, till at last Sarnidac came running down his hill to watch them closer. As he came to the white road, the last of the figures passed, and Sarnidac ran, limping behind him, down the road. For Sarnidac was weary of the city, wherein all derided him, and when he saw these figures all hurrying away, he thought that they went perhaps to some other city, beyond the hills, over which the sun shone brighter, or where there was more food, for he was poor, even perhaps where people had not the custom of laughing at Sarnidac. So this procession of figures that stooped and seemed larger than men went southward down the road, and a lame dwarf hobbled behind them. Carmazan, now called the city of the last of temples, lies southward of the Nidun hills. This is the story of Pompeides, now chief prophet of the only temple in the world, and greatest of all the prophets that have been. On the slopes of Nidun I was seated once above Carmazan. There I saw figures in the morning, striding through much dust along the road that leads across the world. Striding up the hill, they came towards me, not with the gait of men, and soon the first one came to the crest of the hill, where the road dips to find the plains again, where lies Carmazan. And now I swear by all the gods that are gone that this thing happened as I shall say it, and was surely so. When those that came striding up the hill came to its summit, they took not the road that goes down into the plains, nor trod the dust any longer, but went straight on and upwards, striding as they strode before, as though the hill had not ended nor the road dipped. And they strode as though they trod no yielding substance, yet they stepped upwards through the air. This the gods did, for they were not born men who strode that day so strangely away from earth. But I, when I saw this thing, when already 3 had passed me, leaving earth, cried out before the 4th, "Gods of my childhood, guardians of little homes, whither are ye going, leaving the round earth to swim alone and forgotten in so great a waste of sky?" And one answered, "Heresy apace shoots her fierce glare over the world, and men's faith grows dim, and the gods go. Men shall make iron gods, and gods of steel, when the wind and the ivy meet within the shrines of the temples of the gods of old." And I left that place, as a man leaves fire by night, and going plainwards down the white road that the gods spurned, cried out to all that I passed to follow me, and so crying came to the city's gates. And there I shouted to all near the gates, "From yonder hilltop the gods are leaving earth." Then I gathered many, and we all hastened to the hill to pray the gods to tarry, and there we cried out to the last of the departing gods. "Gods of old prophecy, and of men's hopes, leave not the earth, and all our worship shall hum about your ears as never it hath before, and oft the sacrifice shall squeal upon your altars." And I said, "Gods of still evenings and quiet nights, go not from earth, and leave not your carven shrines, and all men shall worship you still. For between us and yonder still blue spaces oft roam the thunder and the storms. There in his hiding lurks the dark eclipse, and there are stored all snows and hails and lightnings that shall vex the earth for 1,000,000 years. Gods of our hopes, How shall men's prayers, crying from empty shrines, pass through such terrible spaces? How shall they ever fare above the thunder and many storms to whatever place the gods may go in that blue waste beyond? But the gods bent straight forward, and trampled through the sky, and looked not to the right, nor left, nor downwards, nor ever heeded my prayer. And one cried out, hoping yet to stay the gods, though nearly all were gone, saying, O gods, rob not the earth of the dim hush that hangs round all your temples. Bereave not all the world of old romance. Take not the glamour from the moonlight, nor tear the wonder out of the white mists in every land. For, O ye gods of the childhood of the world, when you have left the earth, you shall have taken the mystery from the sea, and all its glory from antiquity, and you shall have wrenched out hope from the dim future. There shall be no strange cries at night-time, half understood, nor songs in the twilight, and the whole of the wonder shall have died with last year's flowers in little gardens or hill-slopes leaning south. For with the gods must go the enchantment of the plains, and all the magic of dark woods, and something shall be lacking from the quiet of early dawn. For it would scarce befit the gods to leave the earth, and not take with them that which they had given it. Out beyond the still blue spaces ye will need the holiness of sunset for yourselves, and little sacred memories, and the thrill that is in stories told by firesides long ago. One strain of music, one song, one line of poetry, and one kiss, and a memory of one pool with rushes, and each one the best. Shall the gods take to whom the best belongs, when the gods go? Sing a lamentation, people of Kamazan, sing a lamentation for all the children of earth at the feet of the departing gods. Sing a lamentation for the children of earth who now must carry their prayers to empty shrines, and around empty shrines must rest at last. Then, when our prayers were ended, and our tears shed, we beheld the last and smallest of the gods halted upon the hilltop. Twice he called to them, with a cry somewhat like the cry wherewith our shepherds hail their brethren, and long gazed after them, and then deigned to look no longer, and to tarry upon earth, and turn his eyes on men. Then a great shout went up when we saw that our hopes were saved, and that there was still on earth a haven for our prayers. Smaller than men now seemed the figures that had loomed so big, as one behind the other, far over our heads they still strode upwards. But the small god that had pitied the world came with us down the hill, still deigning to tread the road, though strangely, not as men tread, and into Kamazan. There we housed him, in the palace of the king, for that was before the building of the temple of gold, and the king made sacrifice before him with his own hands, and he that hath pitied the world did eat the flesh of the sacrifice. And the book of knowledge of the gods in Kamazan tells how the small god that pitied the world told the prophets that his name was Sarnidac, and that he herded sheep, and that therefore he is called the shepherd god, and sheep are sacrificed upon his altars thrice a day, and the north, east, west, and the south are the 4 hurdles of Sarnidac, and the white clouds are his sheep. And the book of the knowledge of the gods tells further how the day on which Pombides found the gods shall be kept for ever as a fast until the evening, and called the fast of the departing. But in the evening shall a feast be held, which is named the Feast of the Relenting, for on that evening Sarnidac pitied the whole world and tarried. And the people of Kamazan all prayed to Sarnidac, and dreamed their dreams, and hoped their hopes, because their temple was not empty. Whether the gods that are departed be greater than Sarnidac, none know in Kamazan. But some believe that in their azure windows they have set lights, that lost prayers swarming upwards may come to them like moths, and at last find haven and light far up above the evening and the stillness where sit the gods. But Sarnidac wondered at the strange figures, at the people of Kamazan, and at the palace of the king, and the customs of the prophets, but wondered not more greatly at aught in Kamazan than he had wondered at the city which he had left. For Sarnidac, who had not known why men were unkind to him, thought that he had found at last the land for which the gods had let him hope, where men should have the custom of being kind to Sarnidac. Sounds like Sarnidac got a little lucky there. Got a little lucky. That's okay. Little by little, working our way through that one. Time and the gods. Sarnidac just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The right place at the right time. Okay, let's, what do we got? Take a little, what do we got? New Arabian Nights. Actually, we should probably work on that this coming Sunday. Do the 3rd story from the Suicide Club in the New Arabian Nights. Okay, where are we at? Where's I'm going to turn off this scene here for a minute. 1 second. This is the Kindle. Bloop. There we go. Let's get the where's Nesbit? The book of Grim Tales. I don't think we've read Man Size in Marble. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 40, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, okay, 50, too long. Mass for the Dead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 30. Yeah, we'll do that one. Man, oh man. It's back. The Mass for the Dead. Okay, no, I was just looking up, let's put a little marker here. Just looking up Edith Nesbit. She has that goofy Book of Dragons thing there, but she has this book called Grim Tales that I downloaded as well. Edith Nesbit, writing stuff a long time ago, long time ago. Not as long ago as Tennyson, though. Yeah, mostly known for children's stories, but here we go. We're going to read this one, and I think this will probably get us to the top of the hour. I think probably. I'm going to hit the just before we get in there. It's going to try that test that chat window again. Just don't know why it's not working. All widgets, chat box. I am logged in. I'm logged in as under YouTube. Do I just need to? Oh my lord! There, wow! It just did everything. Okay, so all I did, but man, I've been monkeying with this for like 3 days to get it going. All I had to do was hit save settings. Except, I mean, I've saved settings before on this. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, I'll just, I'm going to remember to do that a little later. So it'll stay up there for like 2 minutes. Okay. There we go. That's a little more like it. Okay. And the thing on the other side of the stream works as well. Okay. Oh, boy, well, that's a bit of a relief. Okay, obviously it's not as reliable as it could be, but that's neither here nor there. Okay. Let's do it. Get on to the next one. The Mass for the Dead by Edith Nesbit. I was awake, widely, cruelly awake. I had been awake all night. What sleep could there be for me when the woman I loved was to be married next morning? Married, and not to me. I went to my room early. The family party in the drawing-room maddened me. Grouped about the round table with the stamped plush cover, each was busy with work or book or newspaper, but not too busy to stab my heart through and through with their talk of the wedding. Her people were near neighbors of mine, so why should her marriage not be canvassed in my home circle? They did not mean to be cruel. They did not know that I loved her, but she knew it. I told her, but she knew it before that. She knew it from the moment when I came back from 3 years of musical study in Germany, came back and met her in the wood where we used to go nutting when we were children. I looked into her eyes, and my whole soul trembled with thankfulness that I was living in a world that held her also. I turned and walked by her side, through the tangled green wood, and we talked of the long-ago days, and it was, "Have you forgotten?" and "Do you remember?" till we reached her garden gate. Then I said, "Goodbye. No, auf Wiedersehen, and in a very little time, I hope." And she answered, "Goodbye. By the way, you haven't congratulated me yet." "Congratulated you?" "Yes. Did I not tell you I'm to marry Mr. Benoliel next month?" And she turned away and went up the garden slowly. I asked my people, and they said it was true. Kate, my dear playfellow, was to marry this Spaniard, rich, willful, accustomed to win, polished in manners and base in life. Why was she to marry him? "No one knows," said my father, "but her father is talked about in the city, and Benoliel, the Spaniard, is rich. Perhaps that's it." That was it. She told me so when, after 2 weeks spent with her and near her, I implored her to break so vile a chain, and to come to me, who loved her, whom she loved. "You are quite right," she said calmly. We were sitting in the window seat of the oak parlor in her father's desolate old house. "I do love you, and I shall marry Mr. Benoliel." "Why?" Look around you and ask me why, if you can. I looked around, on the shabby, bare room, with its faded hangings of sage-green marine, its threadbare carpet, its patched, washed-out chintz chair covers. I looked out through the square, latticed window at the ragged, unkempt lawn, at her own gown, of poor material, though she wore it as queens might desire to wear ermine. And I understood. Kate is obstinate. It's her one fault. I knew how vain would be my entreaties, yet I offered them. How unavailing my arguments, yet they were set forth. How useless my love and my sorrow, yet I showed them to her. "No," she answered, but she flung her arms round my neck as she spoke, and held me as one may hold one's best treasure. "No, no. You are poor, and he is rich. You wouldn't have me break my father's heart. He's so proud, and if he doesn't get some money next month he will be ruined. I'm not deceiving anyone. Mr. Benoliel knows I don't care for him, and if I marry him he's going to advance my father a large sum of money. Oh, I assure you that everything has been talked over and settled. There's no going from it." "Child, child," I cried, "how calmly you speak of it. Don't you see that you are selling your soul and throwing mine away?" "Father Fabian says I'm doing right," she answered, unclasping her hands, but holding mine in them, and looking at me with those clear grey eyes of hers. "Are we to be unselfish in everything else, and in love to think only of our own happiness? I love you, and I shall marry him. Would you rather the positions were reversed?" "Yes," I said, "for then I would make you love me." "Perhaps he will," she said bitterly. Even in that moment her mouth trembled with the ghost of a smile. She always loved to tease. She goes through more moods in a day than most other women in a year. Drowning the smile came tears. But she controlled them, and she said, "Goodbye. You see I'm right, don't you? Oh, Jasper, I wish I hadn't told you I loved you. It will only make you more unhappy." "It makes my one happiness," I answered. "Nothing can take that from me. And that happiness he will never have. Say again that you love me." "I love you, I love you, I love you." With further folly of tears and mad loving words we parted, and I bore my heartache away, leaving her to bear hers into her new life. And now she was to be married tomorrow, and I could not sleep. When the darkness became unbearable, I lighted a candle, and then lay staring vacantly at the roses on the wallpaper, or following with my eyes the lines and curves of the heavy mahogany furniture. The solidity of my surroundings oppressed me. In the dull light, the wardrobe loomed like a hearse, and my violin case looked like a child's coffin. I reached a book and read till my eyes ached, and the letters danced a pas fantastique up and down the page. I got up and had 10 minutes with the dumbbells. I sponged my face and my hands with cold water, and tried again to sleep. Vainly. I lay there, miserably wide awake. I tried to say poetry, the half-forgotten tasks of my school days even, but through everything ran the refrain, "Kate is to be married tomorrow, and not to me. Not to me." I tried counting up to 1,000. I tried to imagine sheep in a lane, and to count them as they jumped through a gap in an imaginary hedge, all the time-honoured spells with which sleep is wooed, vainly. Then the waits came, and a torture to the nerves was superadded to the torture of the heart. After 15 minutes of carols, every fibre of me seemed vibrating in an agony of physical misery. To banish the echo of the mistletoe bough, I hummed softly to myself a melody of Palestrinas, and felt more awake than ever. Then the thing happened which nothing will ever explain. As I lay there, I heard, breaking through and gradually overpowering the air I was suggesting, a harmony which I had never heard before, beautiful beyond description, and as distinct and definite as any song man's ears have ever listened to. My first half-formed thought was more waits, but the music was choral music, true and sweet. With it mingled an organ's notes, and every note the music grew in volume. It is absurd to suggest that I dreamed it, for still hearing the music, I leaped out of bed and opened the window. The music grew fainter. There was no one to be seen in the snowy garden below. Shivering, I shut the window. The music grew more distinct, and I became aware that I was listening to a mass, a funeral mass, and one which I had never heard before. I lay in my bed and followed the whole course of the office. The music ceased. I was sitting up in bed, my candle alight, and myself as wide awake as ever, and more than ever possessed by the thought of her. But with a difference. Before I had only mourned the loss of her. Now my thoughts of her were mingled with an indescribable dread. The sense of death and decay that had come to me with that strange, beautiful music colored all my thoughts. I was filled with fancies of hushed houses, black garments, rooms where white flowers and white linen lay in a deathly stillness. I heard echoes of tears and of dim-voiced bells tolling monotonously. I shivered, as it were, on the brink of irreparable woe. And in its contemplation I watched the dull dawn slowly overcome the pale flame of my candle, now burnt down into its socket. I felt that I must see Kate once again before she gave herself away. Before 10 o'clock I was in the oak parlor. She came to me. As she entered the room, her pallor, her swollen eyelids, and the misery in her eyes wrung my heart as even that night of agony had not done. I literally could not speak. I held out my hands. Would she reproach me for coming to her again, for forcing upon her a second time the anguish of parting? She did not. She laid her hands in mine and said, "I am thankful that you have come. Do you know, I think I'm going mad. Don't let me go mad, Jasper." The look in her eyes underlined her words. I stammered something and kissed her hands. I was with her again, and joy fought again with grief. I must tell someone. If I am mad, don't lock me up. Take care of me, won't you? Would I not? Understand, she went on, it was not a dream. I was wide awake, thinking of you. The waits had not long gone, and I was looking at your likeness. I was not asleep. I shivered as I held her fast. As heaven sees us, I did not dream it. I heard a mass sung, and Jasper, it was a mass for the dead. I followed the office. You are not a Catholic, but I feared, I don't know what I thought. I'm thankful there's nothing wrong with you. I felt a sudden certainty and complete sense of power possess me. Now, in this, her moment of weakness, while she was so completely under the influence of a strong emotion, I could and would save her from Benoliel, and myself from lifelong pain. "Kate," I said, "I believe it is a warning. You shall not marry this man. You shall marry me, and none other." She leaned her head against my shoulder. She seemed to have forgotten her father, and all the reasons for her marriage with Benoliel. "You don't think I'm mad?" "No." "Then take care of me. Take me away. I feel safe with you." Thus all obstacles vanished in less time than the length of a lover's kiss. I dared not stop to consider the coincidence of supernatural warning, nor what it might mean. Face to face with crowned hope, I am proud to remember that common sense held her own. The room in which we were had a French window. I fetched her garden hat and a shawl from the hall, and we went out through the still white garden. We did not meet a soul. When we reached my father's garden, I took her in by the back way to the summer house, and left her, though I was half afraid to leave her. And while I went into the house, I snatched my violin and my checkbook, took all my spare money, scrawled a line to my father, and rejoined her. Still, no one had seen us. We walked to a station 5 miles away, and by the time Benoliel would reach the church, I was leaving Doctors' Commons with a special license in my pocket. 2 hours later, Kate was my wife, and we were quietly and prosaically eating our wedding breakfast in the dining room of the Grand Hotel. "And where shall we go?" I said. "I don't know," she answered, smiling. "You have not much money, have you?" "Oh, dear me, yes. I'm not rich, but I'm not absolutely a church mouse." "Could we go to Devonshire?" she asked, twisting her new ring round and round. "Devonshire? Why, that is where—" "Yes, I know. Benoliel arranged to go there. Jasper. I'm afraid of Benoliel." "Then why—" "Foolish person," she answered. "Do you think that Benoliel will be likely to go to Devonshire now?" We went to Devonshire. I had had a small legacy a few months earlier, and I did not permit money cares to trouble my new and beautiful happiness. My only fear was that she would be saddened by thoughts of her father. But I am thankful to remember that in those first days she too was happy, so happy that there seemed to be hardly room in her mind for any thought but of me. And every hour of every day I said to my soul, but for that portent, whatever it boded, she might not have been my wife, but his. The first 4 or 5 days of our marriage are flowers that memory always keeps fresh. Kate's face had recovered its wild rose bloom, and she laughed and sang and jested and enjoyed all our little daily adventures with the fullest, freest-hearted gaiety. Then I committed the supreme imbecility of my life. One of those acts of folly on which one looks back all one's life with a half-stamp of the foot, and the unanswerable question, how on earth could I have been such a fool? We were sitting in a little sitting-room. hideous in intention, but redeemed by blazing fire, and the fact that two were there, sitting hand in hand, gazing into the fire, and talking of their future and of their love. There was nothing to trouble us. No one had discovered our whereabouts, and my wife's fear of Benoliel's revenge seemed to have dissolved before the flame of our happiness. And as we sat there, peaceful and untroubled, the imp of the perverse jogged my elbow, as, alas, he does so often. And I was moved to tell my wife that I, too, had heard that unearthly midnight music, that her hearing of it was not, as she had grown to think, a mere nightmare, a strange dream, but something more strange, more significant. I told her how I had heard the Mass for the dead and all the tale of that night. She listened intently, and I thought her strangely indifferent. When I had finished, she took her hand from mine and covered her face. I believe it was a warning to us to flee temptation. We ought never to have married. Oh, my poor father. Her tone was one that I had never heard before. Its hopeless misery appalled me, and justly, for no arguments, no entreaties, no caresses could win my wife back to the mood of an hour before. She tried to be cheerful, but her gaiety was forced, and her laughter stung my heart. She spoke no more about the music, and when I tried to reason with her about it, she smiled a gloomy little smile and said, "I cannot be happy. I will not be happy. It is wrong. I have been very selfish and wicked. You think me very idiotic, I know, but I believe there is a curse on us. We shall never be happy again." "Don't you love me any more?" I asked, like a fool. "Love you?" She only repeated my words, but I was satisfied on that score. But those were miserable days. We loved each other passionately, yet our hours were spent like those of lovers on the eve of parting. Long, long silences took the place of foolish little jokes and childish talk, which happy lovers know. And more than once, waking in the night, I heard my wife sobbing, and feigned sleep, with the bitter knowledge that I had no power to comfort her. I knew that the thought of her father was with her always, and that her anxiety about him grew day by day. I wore myself out in trying to think of some way to divert her thoughts from him. I could not, indeed, pay his debts, but I could have him live with us, a much greater sacrifice. And having a good connection, both as a musician and composer, I did not doubt that I could support her and him in comfort. But Kate had made up her mind that the disgrace of bankruptcy would break her father's heart, and my Kate is not easy to convince or persuade. At Torquay, it occurred to me that perhaps it would be well for her to see a priest. True, Father Fabian had counselled her to marry Benoliel, but I could hardly believe that most priests would advise a girl to marry a bad man, whom she did not love, for the sake of any worldly gain whatsoever. She received the suggestion with favour, but without enthusiasm, and we sought out a Catholic church to make inquiries. As we opened the outer door of the church, we heard music, and as we stood in the entrance, and I laid my hand on the heavy inner door, my other hand was caught by Kate. "Jasper," she whispered. "It is the same." Some person opening the door behind us compelled us to move forward. In another moment we stood in the dusky church, stood hand in hand in dim daylight, listening to the same music that each had heard in the lonely night on the eve of our wedding. I put my arm round my wife and drew her back. "Come away, my darling," I whispered. "It is a funeral service." She turned her eyes on me. "I must understand. I must see who it is. I shall go mad if you take me away now. I cannot bear any more." We walked up the aisle and placed ourselves as near as possible to the spot where the coffin lay, covered with flowers and with tapers burning about it. And we heard that music again, every note of it the same that each had heard before. And when the service was over, I whispered to the sacristan, "Whose music was that?" "Our organist's," he answered. "It is the first time that they've had it. Fine, wasn't it?" Who is being buried?" "A foreign gentleman, sir. They do say as his lady, as was to be, gave him the slip on his wedding day, and he had given her father thousands, they say, if the truth was known." "But what was he doing here?" "Well, that's the curious part, sir, to show his independence. What does he do but go the same tour he had planned for his wedding trip, and there was a railway accident, and him and everyone in his carriage killed in a twinkling, so to speak. Lucky for the young lady she was off with somebody else." The sacristan laughed softly to himself. Kate's fingers gripped my arm. "What was his name?" she asked. I would not have asked. I did not wish to hear it. "Benoliel," said the sacristan. "Curious name and curious tale. Everyone's talking of it." Everyone had something else to talk of when it was found that Benoliel's pride, which had permitted him to buy a wife, had shrunk from reclaiming the purchase money when the purchase was lost to him. And to the man who had been willing to sell his daughter, the retention of her price seemed perfectly natural. From the moment when she heard Benoliel's name on the sacristan's lips, all Kate's gaiety and happiness returned. She loved me, and she hated Benoliel. She was married to me, and he was dead. And his death was far more of a shock to me than to her. Women are curiously kind and curiously cruel, and she never could see why her father should not have kept the money. It is noteworthy that women, even the cleverest and the best of them, have no perception of what men mean by honor. How do I account for the music? My good critic, my business is to tell my story, not to account for it. And do I not pity Benoliel? Yes, I can afford now to pity most men, alive or dead.